Listen, we're about to dive into a fantastic conversation, having a look at Moi's cabinet. All these three men served under him, even as the country begins, or rather continues to mourn the late president. And we want you to be part of this conversation. 22422 is our SMS line. At Citizen TV Kenya is also on Twitter.
I want us to introduce the panel that we have here in studio today. I want to begin with the former governor of Bomet. He was also a minister and an assistant minister before then in the Moi's government, that is Isaac Ruto. Karibu sana to the show.
Thank you.
Next to him is the former vice president, Musalia Mudavadi. He's also the ANC party leader currently. He has been a former deputy prime minister, but most importantly served under President Moi for about 10 years in cabinet, I believe. Karibu sana to the show.
Asante.
And then you have Kipruto Arap Kira. I understand that middle name is very important. He's a former assistant minister in the government of Daniel Moi, but also served as minister in the Moi Kibaki government. Karibu sana to the show.
Thank you.
All right, and before we delve into what used to happen in cabinet in those years, I want us to take a look at what's happening in the two dailies. I want to begin with the front page of the Daily Nation, the journey home, the pictures of Kenyans who queued in the streets of Nairobi, heading to parliament buildings to view the body of the late president. You'll see down there the image of former President Moi Kibaki, of course, having his moment to view the body and pay his last respects. And then you will see that down there there's a small story, loyalists and rebels. Page 10 to 11, different faces of the men and women who served in former President Moi's cabinet over his 24 years rule. You'll be looking at that on page 10 and 11. But what do you have on the front page of the Standard?
So on the Standard newspaper, first of all, they approximate 100,000 as the number of people who went to view the body of the late president as of yesterday. And there's a timeline over there even given today's events and tomorrow's events. 10 heads of state are expected to be in the country ahead of Moi's burial. The last respects in testimony to the bravery that defined President Moi, soldiers reflect on his calm demeanor in one of the most tumultuous periods of his presidency, as thousands queue to view his body. At least 10 heads of state and representatives expected for his funeral service tomorrow. This gets coverage on page 2 all the way to page 13, 19 and 20, and page 44 of the Standard newspaper this morning. Of course, very beautiful pictures over here of Kenyans and even the military there as the country gives honor and pays honor to the second president of the country.
And I want to begin with the panelists. And when you look at the public viewing, the state funeral, the events that have happened so far, what do you make of all these, even as we remember President Moi as one that ruled the country for 24 years? We begin with you, Governor Isaac Ruto.
Yes, Kenyans really want to pay their last respects. Most of the senior citizens, those even above 50, remember him all the way from when they were in primary school. There is a generation that just wants to know a little bit more about who Moi was. But for most of us, he was a permanent feature since we were in primary school, throughout secondary school, university levels, and then our adult life. He introduced us into serious work and mentored quite a number of us. So I can understand why a lot of Kenyans really want to pay their last respects.
Right.
Yes.
And we'll be getting to your personal reflections of the former president. But Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, yes, it's been 2 days. Today is the third day of the public viewing. Of course, there are those that have been asking the question, how appropriate is it for a fallen or a former president? I mean, what is the place of all this that we are witnessing in terms of honoring the dead, even as we queue to go view the body?
Well, this was, of course, no ordinary citizen. He was the president of the Republic of Kenya for 24 years. Prior to that, he was a vice president and a parliamentarian way back from 1955. So he's somebody who has a very large footprint on the politics of this country. So the viewing is both a matter of respect, but there's also the very somber moment that a country is going through. And there's also extreme curiosity because when you look at the pictures here, remember Moi was out of office for a period of 18 years. So chances are the majority of the 100,000 people who have gone to view Moi may be people who are much younger
Right.
In terms of and it reflects our demographic structure today. Some of them may never have seen him physically. Some of them saw him when they were very young, as Honorable Isaac says. And others perhaps never saw him at all in the context of the presidency. So it's a mixed kind of situation. Right. Curiosity, and then the somber moment. But by and large, it is a befitting send-off for Mzee Moi.
All right, Honorable Kipruto, how do you choose, or what part of Moi's legacy will you remember?
Well, I remember quite a lot of it because he happens to have taken over the presidency when I was already an adult. And therefore, I would not be able to give a segment selectively of the legacy that I want to enjoy in the rest of Kenyans in celebrating. But suffice to say the following, that Mzee Moi was a permanent feature in the political landscape of this country for those 24 years, plus the period he was a vice president. You remember he deputized somebody who was almost 30-something years gap in terms of age, and therefore he was still active, and therefore many of the activities the late President Jomo Kenyatta was supposed to undertake, President Moi deputized for him. And that means that this country saw his image for the period of almost 40 years, uninterrupted. For those of us who come from the Rift Valley province or the former Rift Valley province, for more than 50 years, he was a permanent feature in our lives. And Moi being a very active person, he was able to impact almost to every sub-location of this country. And that is the tribute that many of us would give him. And as my colleagues have said, this could be a product of curiosity and also respect for a man whose name was synonymous with almost every other institution of Kenya.
Right. Yeah. And of course, the public viewing continues. Today is the last day, so if you would want to pay your last respects in viewing the body, then you have a chance until 5 p.m. because the body after that will have to be moved to the National Stadium tomorrow for the memorial service, and later on to Kabrak.
For Wednesday.
To his Kabrak home for the funeral. Yes. So be sure to continue following the proceedings on Citizen TV. But I want now to get personal. And I want to begin with you, former Vice President. So I believe you're just out of school, and then you found yourself into politics. Describe to us how that relationship became, your interaction with the former president as you joined politics.
Well, I joined politics in 1989, and for purposes of record, I actually had left the university in 1984. So there was a 3-year or 4-year gap in between. But I can tell you that joining cabinet was a surprise for me, because I entered politics immediately after the demise of my father, Moses Mudavadi. And within a space of 1 month, in 1989, after the general election, after the by-election, I became his Minister for Supplies and Marketing. And subsequently, after the multi-party elections, I became his Minister for Finance. Now, the most interesting thing I can tell you about Moi is that he was a guiding figure in terms of trying to mentor you to get to understand the operations of government. And with time, I got to realize that he read all his cabinet memos very, very carefully, and he was a stickler for detail. So when you had a presentation to make as a cabinet minister, if you had not done your homework well, he would definitely send you back to look at what you were supposed to be talking about.
Right.
And expect you to make a better presentation at the next level.
Honorable Isaac Ruto,
Yes.
the life of President Moi behind the scene was very private, but a lot of his approach in what happened in the public sort of reflected also his private life. His approach towards his obsessiveness with his health, his style, his time management, his work ethic, and so forth. But it's only close people who worked with him, such as yourselves, who would perhaps be able to know. The Moi that we saw in public, is that the same Moi that reflected his private life?
Yes, the way we knew Moi, he was very disciplined. He would wake up very early in the morning, go for his prayers, maybe a bit of exercise, and then on duty from 6 o'clock. You would go to State House. If he asked you to be there at 6:30, you would find him already there. He arrived much earlier, and he would not miss time. He was a very strong person when it came to sticking to programs. Yeah, if it says 10 o'clock, he really meant 10 o'clock. And if you arrive later, you'd find him very restless.
Do you remember your first encounter with the former president?
Well, my first encounter with the president was way back in 1981. It was the first time I came close to him and had a chat, shook hands. Then I was a student at the University of Nairobi, a student leader, and we had gone there, the delegation of students from Kericho. And I was quite awed by his presence. And later on, we came to learn that, like the vice president has just said, that he actually understood a lot and that he read. In the evening, he would go back to reading. You don't go looking for him at 8 o'clock. He's busy reading. He's doing so many other things. And he was fully prepared for the next day. Okay. Something which most of us weren't quite able to do, I must admit. Yes.
For him, Honorable Kirwa, so you served in cabinet for quite a short stint. Maybe you can help us understand how long that was and even the circumstances in which you left, but also how did you get to meet him the first time? How was your relationship then?
Well, I can say without any measure of contradiction that the Moi that we saw in public and the Moi, the private person, were almost two different individuals. At close range, Moi would come to your level, deal with you as the situation requires. Of course, quite often, because we were rebels, given the fact that we were slightly younger, he would be able to counsel us. And at times, you are called to State House. You don't know exactly what the agenda is. You would take a bit of time to tell you what you should be doing and what you're not doing. But anytime you had a reasoned argument with him, he would be able to understand you. And once you agreed on a certain script, you would keep to it. I met him the first time in 1989 in the run-up to the election that made me an MP. Incidentally, we came in together. Almost a difference of a few months. 89? 89.
Okay.
So I met him in Kericho Tea Hotel, and we had some discussion. Subsequently, as my president, we used to meet him quite often through parliamentary group meetings, which he was very fond of, because he was a man of consultation. And as to how long I served him, he appointed me twice, and he sacked me once. And when he sacked me, I was his assistant minister in the Ministry of Agriculture. So he appointed me in the run-up to 97 elections as assistant minister in the agriculture. And immediately after election, he appointed me again in the same ministry as assistant minister. And on the 27th of May, 1998, he sacked me for very good reasons. We had, with a few other colleagues in parliament, decided to form a party. As a runaway party from Kano, which party was not registered, the UDM. UDM was registered subsequently. So he found that possibly I was dealing with issues at variance with the position of the party. So I was given a sack, and I was paid my salary up to the 27th of May.
That's interesting. What would make you want to run away from Kano?
A number of things. Because, you know, in any house, there are certain dynamics that develop. And those dynamics make some people uncomfortable. And we felt that we had had enough of Kano. Personally, I thought so. And I called my constituents that in the next election, which was 2002, I told them I'm not going to run in Kano, or rather lose running on another party than win running on Kano again. Remember, I had had 3 elections consecutively, and I had won in Kano. But I felt my home was elsewhere, not in Kano.
You've described Moi as a man of consultation, a man who who did that quite often. What else about his leadership would you remember, whether it was good or bad? Like you said, he fired you for obvious and good reasons.
Yes.
And he still appointed you in other areas as well.
Well, a number of things. One, apart from being a stickler to time and rules and procedures, because whatever we did, whether in Parliament, he stuck to the rules of the game. He was able to take us through every procedure that was required. The other issue is that his consultation was not just for the sake of seeing people sitting around him. He took serious note of any meetings that we had, whether as parliamentarians or as opinion leaders from the Rift Valley, because he would have a number of meetings here in Nairobi and in various state lodges. When he was in Eldoret, he would call some of us, plus some elders, and get to ventilate on a number of issues that were topical at the time.
And how important to, even the rest of you can jump in, how important to the views collected from such a fora that he's consulting, if I may call them barazas?
Well, very important in the sense that he was able to get the pulse rate of the nation, and we are also able to resonate with this thinking and the approach to issues. Remember, Moi was a man of transition in the sense that he came into the presidency towards the end of the Cold War, and at the beginning of the situation that we have today, there were a number of challenges, and we needed to know, because even the budget started getting diminished. Some people were laid off. Remember the structural adjustment programs, which Mheshimiwa can talk better about. All those were challenges to the nation and agitation for multipartyism.
Why do you think Moi did that? Why do you think Moi was at the heart of this nation? As a president, with his demeanor, he was speaking to the people on the ground, finding out what's happening with the nation. Why do you think he was that obsessed?
Well, I think it was basically his style, because he really didn't have to. But he resonated well even with elders in the villages, and he would remember them. That is one of the great things he had, and that's why you had to be even careful when you are discussing with him, because he knew all sides of the question. He would be talking to his DCs, and he will be talking to elders, and he'll be talking to church leaders. He'll also be talking to the youth and women leaders. Remember, under maendeleo ya wanawake, he had quite a huge network of communication down to the village, and therefore he tended to have a very wide view, contrary to what a lot of people imagine. He had a huge view of and availability of information, and every morning as he took tea, he had something like a baraza. He wouldn't take tea alone in the morning. He would be about 5, 6, 7 people. During lunchtime, about 15, 20. And then later on, weekends, he would spend his time meeting people. Like if he were to come for a meeting in a place like Muranga, yeah, he would meet people, elders and leaders.
Njiru said
before
in a day
he goes
he
to
would
the
do
public.
27 meetings.
Yes?
Njiru said in a day he would do 27 meetings.
Yes, and that is true. He really did it. And that was his strength, which we could not even understand.
Honorable Mudavadi, I'm just wondering, he is a man holding all those meetings in a day, yet he's still expected to make very crucial decisions for the country. And imagining it at a time like now where there are so many varied views, if you have to sit in all these meetings, how then do you arrive at a decision later on? When do you work beyond the meetings?
Well, that's an interesting thing. Moi was a very consummate politician. Remember one thing, that Moi was a teetotaler. That is one thing you must always remember. Secondly, Moi, over time, used his institutions very, very carefully. For instance, when Isaac says that he would give you an appointment at 6, sometimes Moi would have already woken up at 5. I personally have been called at 5 a.m. By him. Not once, but a number of times, particularly when I was in Treasury. And Moi would wake up, have his early session with the people responsible for intelligence throughout the country. By the time it's 6, he's beginning to meet others, but he has already been briefed roundly about what is happening within the country. So some of the decisions he had already made very early in the morning, And in the course of the day, then he was doing more of what would be for the public appearances. But the key and fundamental decisions perhaps have already been made much earlier. One thing that I just want to repeat is that you never would want to underrate him, because he had multiple sources of information. And one thing that Moi never liked was for you to continuously give him the wrong information. Because if you saw him persistently asking you about something in a particular area, you had to get your guard up, because then that means he seems to know something. And you wanted to know whether you're going to be consistent in telling him the truth, or perhaps trying to gloss over issues. So this was the kind of individual we are talking about.
All right, and I, of course, will continue to look into how the people that sat in the cabinet of President Moi, how they remember him, and also looking at some of the messages that we've been hearing from leaders that interacted with him. I want us to take a short break, but when we return, we'll be talking more about that. You can text in your views on 22422, as well as Twitter at Citizen TV Kenya.